if you think that nobody knows who he is. Like, I don't know what to tell you. Like, by any objective measure, it would almost be like saying, like, nobody eats McDonald's.
Oh, God.
Like, I don't really eat McDonald's, but to say, oh, nobody eats McDonald's, that's an objectively stupid statement because McDonald's is on fire as a business. That's what Kendrick Lamar is. He's the McDonald's of halftime performers. Hey, what's up, everybody? I'm Nick DiMartino. That's Ben Kruse. This is another episode of Moving the Goalposts. You can follow all Empty the Bench shows on ETV on YouTube at youtube.com/ETB Network. You can listen to all Empty the Bench shows on ETBpodcast.com, and you can listen to this show wherever you get your podcasts. And you can follow us across social media at MTGP ETB. You can follow the Empty the Bench Network across social media at ETB Network. You can follow me on Twitter at Nick DMart. You can follow Ben at Ben Kruse 144. Is that right?
Yep.
All right. You can, and make sure to like and subscribe. And this show, Moving the Goalposts, is presented by Playback. Watching sports is more fun with others, but we spend too much time watching alone. Playback is a virtual space where communities can stream live sports together with everyone perfectly synced up. Creators can hop on stage, deliver their own play-by-play analysis and commentary, and invite viewers up for Q&A. Playback makes watching sports fully interactive and a social experience. From playing fantasy sports, repping your favorite players and teams, and watching with the commentators and communities you care about. Win or lose, sports are best enjoyed together. Join our community by going to playback.tv/ETB Network to find out more, including our live stream schedule. All right. So, we obviously have to talk about the Super Bowl. The Eagles killed the Chiefs in the Super Bowl. A scenario that I never even saw anything like this, to the point where they were dumping Gatorade on the head coach with 2 minutes and 52 seconds left. I've never seen anything like that. It was nothing like I don't think anybody ever expected. I feel like this game was so bad to the point where the biggest stories really had nothing to do with the game in a weird way. Like, the biggest stories were like the side shows. Like, the halftime show was a bigger story than the game was. It was so bad. This was I would argue, a very anticlimactic ending to a great season, is how I would put it. The Super Bowl really is just I don't know how I'd put it. Going out with a bang, in a sense, for football season, not just the NFL, but football season. Like, there's no football other than, like, I don't know, the USFL or something, or the XFL or whatever else there might be. I'm not going to watch. I tried getting into it. I don't like it at all. I really just like the NFL and college football, and that's it. Anyway. And, that's just what the Super Bowl is. It's a way for football season to just go out with a bang. And sometimes it's great. Last year it was great. Most of the time it is great, actually. Most Super Bowls are pretty good. But this is the worst one probably I've ever seen. This is worse than the one 6 years. This is a worse Super Bowl than the Super Bowl we saw 6 years ago between the Patriots and the Rams. This is probably worse than that one. So I don't know what your thoughts were on this.
Yeah, obviously, well, first of all, I felt that there was not a ton of hype coming into the Super Bowl. I think it was because not a lot of people wanted to see this specific type of Super Bowl, despite both teams being very, very good. I think that one specifically, like we were talking about last week, the Chiefs fatigue, and of course with Philly, the fans. So I think a lot of people felt coming in already that they weren't really very excited about it. Two, obviously with the NBA trade deadline, there was so many stuff that happened transaction-wise that it almost kind of took away specifically of oh yeah, there's a game that has happened on Sunday, and there's people that were starting to forget. And probably I'd say until Saturday, people were just like, yep, we have the Super Bowl, and obviously I think a lot of people still watched it, and I think also the venue too. I mean, I was watching. I obviously watched the whole entire pregame, top, start to bottom, but I watched a decent chunk, and I felt that they did a pretty good job with the coverage. I think New Orleans is a very, very good place to have it. Um, but when you look at the overall game, I picked Philly to win, but I did not pick Philly to win by a blowout specifically.
Nobody did.
Um, if
Nobody did.
anything, I was going to have, if anybody was going to blow out, probably go Kansas City, but I was not going to pick Kansas City a blowout whatsoever. I mean, Philly just has way too good of a team. Um, but it was pretty much the similar type of game as the Chiefs played against the Buccaneers, except that Mahomes, I know that obviously the offensive line wasn't as banged up, but Mahomes also just was not great at all in that first half. The Eagles' defense, their front, Vic Fangio had a very, very good game plan coming in. Basically played four guys up at on the line of scrimmage and pretty much just pressured Patrick Mahomes left and right. I mean, the Eagles' defense. When I talked about line of scrimmage, obviously this was before you coming on a football forecast on Saturday. I said that I think that the line of scrimmage is going to be the biggest part of the game, and it showed why. I mean, I understand specifically you have Patrick Mahomes, you have Andy Reid. They're obviously the better of the two when it comes to when you look at the teams. But I think that the line of scrimmage is the biggest factor when I look at it in terms of the overall factor of the game, in terms of how it's going to be won and stuff like that. I also said too, coming to this game, that thought the Eagles have a really good chance to win because of their game plan over running the football. Saquon really didn't have a big game, but they had a lot of time where they just kept chunking the clock after the clock, and that was a good enough job in which they were able to limit the amount of chances Patrick Mahomes had, and when they were already down enough where the Chiefs really were kind of, playing from behind most of this game, the whole entire game specifically. It just was a bigger, tall task to even have. I know a ton of people when it's 24-0, they're saying, "Oh, don't count Mahomes out." You never know. The second half, Mahomes. And I think in the back of my head, I'm just like, yes, it could happen, but with the way that Philly was playing, they were running the football at a very good chunk. And Jalen Hurts, I thought he was very, very good in this game. I understand specifically that the Chiefs, and one thing that I do not understand sometimes about Nolo, I get it. He's one of the best defensive coordinators in the game. He's a great, great defensive coordinator, but I feel like he always does the exact same thing when it comes specifically playing a lot of blitzing, and it's just like, all right, like eventually, like the other teams are going to eventually catch up to it. And the offensive line for the Phillies is very, very good. And they had a couple chances where they basically Saquon, especially, was very, very good in blitz pickup. And Jalen Hurts did a good enough job. I mean, of course, that ball down to Devontae Smith for pretty much the kill shot of the game in that second half. Obviously, the pass that he had to Dotson early on in that game as well. So Hurts did a really, really good job, I thought, in this game. And, Mahomes, obviously, in the second half, yeah, I mean, he made plays here and there. But I think when you look at both quarterbacks, I mean, Jalen Hurts, I think, was the better quarterback in this game. But I think it really wasn't the quarterbacks in terms of why they won this game. I know that they gave Hurts the MVP. It was the front. It was the absolute line of scrimmage that was the massive point in this game. And you got to give a lot of credit to the Eagles. I know we talked about them last year. The Eagles were 10-1 coming into their season last year. They were absolutely flying high, riding high. One of the biggest things, the reason why specifically not a lot of people trust the Eagles was, one, because they're coaching, and two, because their secondary wasn't very good. A couple of years ago, their secondary wasn't very good against this Chiefs team. They were able to exploit it really, really well. Well, Howie Roseman give a lot of credit. They went and drafted Quinion Mitchell, and they got Cooper DeJean, and they were absolutely fantastic yesterday. And Philly just, no doubt in my mind, when it came to that second half, I understand specifically the Chiefs have a great team, Mahomes, but there was no doubt in my mind coming to that second half that Kansas City was coming back. It was just pretty much all Philly from top to bottom in this game. And yeah, just an absolute ass kicking. Definitely something I was not expecting, despite myself picking Philly to win.
Well, I mean, before the second half, before the start of the second half, I thought things can change, because a lot of times things can change quite a lot between the first and the second half. A lot of times one coach makes adjustments and the other one doesn't, or the other team loses focus or whatever. I mean, we saw the 28-3 comeback, which was late in the third quarter. So, crazier things have happened. So that was my thought process. And I mean, I wasn't predicting it to happen, but I was just like, yeah, that could happen for sure.
Well, the difference really quick, though, and sorry to cut you off,
No, you're good.
is Atlanta, I felt, didn't have a great running game in that game, specifically in the Super Bowl. Philly's running game specifically, all they had to do in that game yesterday was continuously run the football. And even if Saquon wasn't running for like crazy amount of chunk plays, just get at least 2 to 3 yards per carry. And you saw specifically in that third, fourth quarter, and obviously the game was kind of out of reach. They basically like milked like 5 to 7 minutes already at the clock. And that
Yeah.
specifically is because you got a couple first downs. It's like, well, you're now down 4 scores now, Kansas City. There's pretty much no hope of you even making. I know obviously Mahomes put up, 21 points, but theoretically, specifically, I mean, at that point in time, Philly was playing probably a lot of prevent. I think they had some of their secondary guys out. It's just like, yeah, of course, Mahomes obviously had some great throws, but I don't think specifically they were going, balls to the walls like they were in the first half too.
Yeah. I mean, the Eagles won 40-22, and the score was actually like it was worse. It was a bigger blowout than the score would even suggest.
Yeah.
I mean, there was just like you said, a lot of in the second half, a lot of prevent defense when the game was kind of out of reach for the Chiefs, and not only that, but also just a lot of controlling, a lot of clock management from the Eagles when maybe they could have scored more. I mean, just from watching this game, the Eagles won on the ground mostly. That was the biggest reason they won. The Chiefs couldn't stop their run game at all. They couldn't stop a nosebleed, it looked like. And not only that, the Chiefs' offensive line was awful.
Mhm.
I mean, the Eagles' front was just unbelievable. And
Yeah.
we all knew they had a really good front, really good pass rush, but we didn't know it was this good. I don't think any of us really did. And they completely dominated the Chiefs' offensive line. And also, certainly in the first half, Mahomes was really bad regardless. Like even on plays that he was horrible, also on plays where you couldn't really blame the offensive line. He was missing a lot of wide open receivers,
Mhm.
a lot
Yep.
of really bad throws.
Mhm.
Um, and the only time he was ever even getting big, every time he got some type of big run, there was a flag on the play. There was like a hold or something like that.
Yeah.
Every time there was any type of big run, the
Mhm.
Chiefs, they couldn't move the ball at all. And I got to tell you, I've never seen them look this bad.
Mhm.
I don't think anybody else has either. I've never seen them look this bad, and I've never seen Mahomes look this bad. I've never seen this Chiefs dynasty look this bad. Actually, but in a weird way, we have because we've seen them. Let me rephrase that. It's not that I've never seen them this bad. We have. We've never seen them this bad in this big of a spot or against this good of a team. Is the right way to put it. I remember earlier in the season, I mean, both these teams actually had similar trajectories this season, which is that like both of them went through a lot of, I don't know if I'd call it growing pains, but but they both had a lot of like, I mean, the Eagles lost a couple of bad games, but both these teams almost lost to a lot of bad teams. You know what I mean? Like both these teams had some just really bad flubs during the regular season. And with both these teams, we were both questioning how good they really were. And sure enough, they both ended up making the Super Bowl.
Mhm.
And just remember when Saquon Barkley dropped that pass against the Falcons, and it felt like it was the end of the world for the Eagles and everything. And the Chiefs too. And, like the Chiefs, they were lucky to beat the Raiders. They were lucky to beat the Panthers.
Broncos.
I mean, or really, they almost blew the game against the Panthers.
Mhm.
And there were all sorts of just really like the Chiefs this year have played so many they've played a lot of really bad games. Honestly,
Mhm.
they played a lot of bad games, and I'll say it's just like a lot of the people were. I mean, like against the Raiders and against the Panthers, and uh, I was just thinking, so many people like in the media were saying the Chiefs, they just know how to win. They
Mhm.
just know how to win. And that's only going to carry you so far because you
Mhm.
can know how to win against the worst teams in the league. It's easy to know how to win against the Panthers.
Well, another thing too about it, they're saying the Chiefs know how to win, but it's very similar like some of the Patriot teams that I knew for a fact were good, but they weren't as good as what I felt like or other people were kind of perceiving them to be because they pretty much were good enough where they're taking advantage of a lot of other teams' bad mistakes in
Yeah.
very critical times as well.
Right. And well, the thing with the Chiefs, the thing with the Chiefs is that they don't really make mistakes. And the thing
Exactly.
is, they didn't lose. I mean, I guess you could say they made a ton of mistakes against the Eagles, but the truth
Mhm.
is, they didn't lose because of that. They just got manhandled.
They got beat. Mhm.
Like it was, they looked overmatched. They didn't lose because of mistakes. They lost because they were just severely overmatched, which we've never seen from the Chiefs. Like I said, we've seen them look bad. We've seen them look bad quite a lot, but they always know how to win. The problem is they always know how to win strategy. That works very well until it doesn't. That works very well
Right.
until it doesn't. And it's just like we've seen the worst of the Chiefs. We've seen signs of this earlier this season, but we finally saw it come to fruition in this game. Like it kind of bit them in the ass. It seemed like
Mhm.
against the Eagles. But the other thing is, I mean, the Eagles this year, they were such a roller coaster ride. I mean, I remember saying at some point, and I've criticized them a lot throughout the year. And Nick Sirianni, I mean, is just not like Eagle fans seem to have very much of actually, I wouldn't say a love hate relationship
Mhm.
until this game, probably more of a hate relationship with Nick Sirianni. Because like Eagle fans hated Sirianni throughout the season, and understandably so. He made a lot of
Yeah.
really boneheaded decisions, and the Eagles just didn't always look that great throughout the season. But I don't know. In a weird way, the Eagles are like a really good comeback story because don't forget how bad things were towards like post Thanksgiving last year.
Yeah.
Remember that collapse? How bad
Mhm.
of a collapse that was uh, in in at the end of last season, and
Mhm.
it didn't look great at the beginning of this season too. And then they just turned it around and ended up winning the
It
Super.
was Yeah, it was pretty much a reversal of 2 seasons in which last year they pretty much felt like they were unbeatable for the first 9, 11 weeks. And then you kind of looked at the back of your head and just like that team just feels like they're beatable because there's so many flaws, specifically, especially their secondary, that you can get to it. Another thing too is they also caught a bad match. I mean, I feel like Tampa Bay is like there's always that team that gives you like the kryptonite, and I feel like Tampa Bay is that kryptonite for Philly. They even beat them this year, earlier on the season. I think that was when they were like 2-2. And actually, Saquon was saying after the game last night on the post game, pretty much saying that, we're going to ride this out. We know we have a very good team and we're going to make a great story out of it. And I really started to really fully believe into this team specifically when probably not after the Giants game of the last week of the season, but probably after the first game against Green Bay. Even though they didn't play great, I just love their defense. I think that defense, people say that defense wins championships, and it's very, very clear. But then their defense just got better and better and better. And their running game specifically, I
Yeah,
didn't realize specifically how good that offensive line is for Philly until I kind of just see specifically this the lines, like the overall, like Philly has just these built guys, just like Lane Johnson, Becton, you name it. They're just absolutely massive.
former
And
Jet, by the way.
and they just work really, really well. Off the offensive line coach for Philly apparently is one of the best in the league. They were saying on on the broadcast yesterday. Um, so yeah, it just they deserve it. People obviously want to, and we haven't even talked about the refs specifically. We're all like worried specifically that the refereeing was going to be a massive factor here and there. I think obviously it was that first drive, right, where the AJ Brown play, which I think to me was a little ticky tack. I mean, I think specifically there could have been a call specifically on Kansas City, but then of course the following drive after where Jalen got the first touchdown, obviously there was a flag there, it was kind of questionable. But outside of that, there really was not a lot, specifically. You could obviously make a case for a couple things, including the Mahomes strip fumble, but the game was already a blowout. It was like
Yeah.
there was the game specifically was not the reason the refereeing, the official was involved. And I really want to thank, specifically the NFL for making that happen. Not because it's obviously like the Chiefs refereeing. I don't really personally care, but just a clear, really good game. And we just saw a game specifically where it's just an axe kicking, and that was that.
Well, the game was so bad to the point where there were so many plays and so many calls that would have been stories had the game actually been closer.
Right.
Had the game actually been close. I mean, like, and it could have gone in either direction. Like some of the throws Mahomes has had on third down,
Mm-hmm.
certainly in the first half of the game. I mean, some of
Yeah.
those would have been huge stories that people would be talking about for years if the game was closer. And some of the calls
Mm-hmm.
potentially would have been talked about a lot. But because the game was such a blowout, it didn't none of it really mattered, which I guess kind of sucks. Like to me, this was a really good NFL season. I think. I mean, not for Jet or Giant fans, but or Patriot fans, really. But so for neither, so not yeah. In other words, not really for fans in the tri-state area, but in general, I think it was a good NFL season.
Mm-hmm.
And it was a good NFL season largely because there were also all sorts of new sort of cool things that we saw this year with
Mm-hmm.
new play. I mean, like we just saw
Rookie
Jaden
class.
Daniels
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
basically establish himself as like the best rookie quarterback ever.
Yeah.
Who would have ever thought that?
Mm-hmm.
And it just sucks kind of that it ended this way. Like usually, like the NFL wants everybody kind of wants the football season to go out with a bang, like
Right.
the Super Bowl from 10 years ago, which was amazing. But you know what? Occasionally, championship games are going to be really, really bad. Occasionally, they're going to be really bad. And you know, there's not much you could do about it. There really isn't. It's just inevitable on some level. I mean, if you look at the Seahawks Broncos Super Bowl from 2014, that was another really bad Super Bowl.
Yeah.
I don't know. Maybe every like 6 or 7 years, it just happens where we just get a bad Super Bowl. I think that's what it was. In 2019, we had a terrible Super Bowl, and 5 years before that, we had a bad Super Bowl. So every maybe 5 or 6 years, we just get bad Super Bowls. It seems like.
Yeah, no, and I was gonna say too is sometimes like the championship games. I mean, literally, Allen Mahomes. I feel like this year, like it's not the Super Bowl specifically, but it gives you that Super Bowl feel. Like you know for a fact of what the chaos is going to be, and you know for a fact it's going to come right down the wire. And you just kind of felt specifically with these type of two teams, even though that people really didn't physically want them in there, they personally were not expecting it to be a physical blowout. So when that kind of happened, it was just like, yeah, I
In a weird way, though, it's like a weird wake-up call for the fans. It's like the fans complaining that we got the same teams that we got 2 years ago.
Yeah.
Which I don't know. It's a little bit of an exaggeration because you know what? We're not going to see. We're probably like I don't think either of these teams have any sort of monopoly on their conferences. Certainly not the Eagles. The Chiefs maybe a little more, but I don't think any of them really do. Like we might not see this matchup again ever. Like who knows in our lifetimes, for all we know. But anyway, I just find it funny because so many fans were complaining about this like matchup, which that, you know, oh, we just saw this 2 years ago. We don't want to see this again, or we have all this Chiefs fatigue. And then they just ended up getting like the worst Super Bowl ever. It's like, like you're not, it's almost like the football gods came down and said, oh yeah, you're not going to be happy about it. How about I'll give you this really shitty game and see how happy you are about it now? Because now the issue is it's not even that like, oh, we care that we don't like that we got this terrible Super Bowl. Now we don't like that we got these two teams in. And now it's like this was one of the worst Super Bowls we've ever seen. That's the difference.
That's why they say the game isn't played on paper; it's played specifically where it's being played. And you can get beat specifically if you're the better team. And I know I picked Philly specifically to win this game, but I did not expect this. So I know.
I have to admit though, like I underestimated Philly. I underestimated how good they were. I underestimated how hot they were at the time. And I find a lot of times when I really, really doubt teams, they end up being better. They end up being good. Or I wouldn't say end up being good, but end up being better than I thought they were. A lot of times they end up winning the whole thing. Which happens a lot. It also like created a lot of odd like conversations on social media. This game, namely, a lot of it has to do with like comparing Mahomes and Brady and people saying these comparisons have to end. I'm just like, okay, I don't understand why sports fans, especially on social media, are allergic to comparisons. There is this weird sense of sports fans being just allergic to comparisons. And I don't know. I don't feel that way. I never feel that way about comparisons. I think comparisons are good and interesting. I
Mhm.
mean, sure, I will criticize the merits of that comparison. I mean, like if you were to okay, yes, if you were to compare Zach Wilson to Tom Brady, I'd be like, okay, I kind of failed to see the comparison there a little bit.
Right,
Um,
yeah,
but I like comparisons. I think comparisons in sports are good. I mean,
yeah.
especially when it comes to like all-time greats. I mean, there are
Mhm.
like we see this all the time. We see this all the time where it's like, stop making this comparison. We have to stop with this comparison. And it is such an odd thing to say because, first of all, comparing is not equating. It is not equating. I remember at an NBA last year in the NBA playoffs, um, people were comparing Anthony Edwards to Michael Jordan, and I see the comparison a lot. I really do. They have very similar playing. They have similar personalities and similar playing styles, and I
Mhm.
think that's really what the comparison was. It's just like, okay, this player is similar to Michael
Yeah.
Jordan, much more similar to Michael Jordan than any player we've really seen. Just not in terms of his legacy, but in terms of like, just in terms of his playing style and personality in a
Yeah.
sense. And I think that's endearing to a lot of people
Mhm.
who lived through the Michael Jordan era. And now somebody who's 40 years younger is similar to him in a lot of ways. But we would often see people saying, stop with the Michael Jordan comparisons until, Anthony Edwards wins a playoff series or wins a championship or something like that, which I find so odd because, first of all, Anthony Edwards is 22 or 23.
Mhm.
Michael Jordan was 22 or 23 at one point too. He started somewhere too. Everybody starts somewhere. Michael Jordan didn't come out of the womb with 6 rings. Michael Jordan had to actually earn it. I mean, throughout the 80s, he couldn't get past the Pistons. People like to forget history a little bit, but that is just the fact that Michael Jordan was not always a winner, and if his career had ended before 1990, we would not have remembered him that way. So Michael Jordan started somewhere too, and it's the same thing with Anthony Edwards. Well, he's starting somewhere too. And
Mhm.
so I can't stand it when sports fans. And I'm going off on a tangent here, but I
No,
just
no,
can't.
you're good.
I can't stand it when sports fans go into this thing where it's like, well, don't make this like if there's a comparison between two players or two people, and it's just like, well, don't compare these two because in this way they're so different. It's like, yeah, comparing does not mean equating and doesn't mean that
Mhm.
there's no differences either.
Right.
And to say that you can't compare Mahomes and Brady is just crazy. You can't compare them because
Mhm.
there's a whole lot of similarities and there's a whole lot of parallels. People do this in art all the time. I mean,
Mhm.
if there's a comedian or a musical artist that is similar to another really famous one in some
Yeah.
ways, people always point out those sort of similar comparisons. It should be the same thing in sports, really. It's the same thing in sports. And I will say, Mahomes and Brady are similar in a lot of ways. In a
Mhm.
lot of ways, they are similar. Not in every way. In
Mhm.
some ways, they are very different.
Mhm.
Namely, in terms of playing style, they don't look similar
Yeah.
in any sense in terms of how they play. But
Yep.
yeah, there's a lot of similarities between them. So I
Mhm.
don't understand this notion from so many sports fans that they can't be compared, that or two individuals can't be compared. I just never got that.
Yeah, no, like, I think you're 100% right. I mean, obviously, as a Patriot fan, I'm a bit biased, but that doesn't mean specifically that I don't like Mahomes. I think Mahomes is a fantastic quarterback, and I think he's arguably going to go down as. I mean, for me, I know people obviously are saying, well, I saw some people on social media saying, well, just because he lost last night specifically, now he's dropped down below Montana, this and that. Like, I don't care. It's your opinion. I think for me specifically, I think Mahomes, I think, is my number two because talent wise, I think that he is above a lot of people specifically that I don't see out of anybody else. But that doesn't mean specifically that other people specifically have their own opinions. And I respect them. I respect most people about it. Um, and yeah, like you were talking about Anthony Edwards and Michael Jordan. Yeah, I mean, blown out of proportion specifically, people aren't specifically saying that Anthony Edwards is going to be the next Michael Jordan. It's just specifically the playing styles. And
Yeah.
you could say exactly that it. They specifically they they play like each other. They got clutch factor. Um, and yeah, they represent their own specific. I mean, hopefully Anthony Edwards plays for. I know Jordan obviously played for two franchises, but not a lot of people are going to remember him for playing for Washington. Just not a lot of people are. Just like Brady with the Bucks,
Yeah.
not a lot of people are. So if Anthony Edwards, I mean, it's going to be really tough for him to stick with one obviously team, but yeah, like I agree with you. Like I just think that there's so many athletes that we look at now. And, Brady Mahomes specifically, what are two things that I really like about both of them? Their head. Great mindset specifically, their clutch, and just the way that they respect one another too. Because you have some athletes too, when they're obviously very competitive, they don't like each other. And that's understandably too.
Yeah.
Brady Mahomes are they're like this specifically when it comes to relationship wise. Like they're even the interview that they had yesterday specifically about each other,
They're also not competing against each other, really. I mean,
right.
they did towards the end of Brady's career, but it's just like not really.
Right, but even sometimes when you have somebody like that is trying to chase you, there's still that kind of like competitive factor. Like there's probably so many people that are out there today and be like, "Oh well, there's nobody specific that could beat Mahomes right now. You got to get Brady out of retirement specifically to stop this overall trend of him winning championships." Like no, like Mahomes is Mahomes. He's one of the best, and I agree with you. I just think that a lot of these comparisons could be so out of proportionate. That doesn't mean specifically that you can have your own opinion specifically of what you want to say.
Yeah, and also, yeah, but like I will also like to point out, it's just that like if you look at if you were to compare any quarterback to Tom Brady who's playing in this era, who's playing right now, you're going to compare anybody to Tom Brady.
Mm-hmm.
Mahomes compares a lot. In fact, any quarterback basically in the past 25 years or so that you can compare to Tom Brady is Mahomes, because
Mm-hmm.
there are so many similarities between Mahomes and Brady. Namely, they
Right.
both have world-class, amazing head coaches. Uh,
Mm-hmm.
they both
And now
have
dynasty teams.
they both have similar levels of success early in their careers.
Mm-hmm.
Um, they're both Brady 7 years into his career, 7 seasons into his career, had 3 Super Bowls.
Mm-hmm.
Mahomes 7 seasons into his career has 3 Super Bowls and
Crazy.
5 Super Bowl appearances. Brady had 4 Super Bowl appearances.
Mm-hmm.
So that is like no two players are like that at all.
Mm-hmm.
No two player. I mean, like the best quarterbacks ever don't fit that
Yeah.
level of success. Now, I'm not
Mm-hmm.
somebody who obsesses over team success, just strictly talking about NFL quarterbacks, but as individuals. But yeah, those things are very, very similar. Like they are not, like I said, not in terms of their playing style, but very similar in terms of just winning. Like if you want to talk about winning, yeah, it's very similar. And Brady didn't make the Super Bowl I mean, look, even though Mahomes was terrible in the Super Bowl, he's 7 years into his career. He made 5 of them.
Yeah.
I mean, that's more than 2/3.
Yeah.
Like the majority of the time he was in the Super Bowl. I mean, people say Joe Montana is the best Super Bowl quarterback ever, and that is certainly true. But it's just like he didn't make it the majority of his career. Like he
Mm-hmm.
played in 4 Super Bowls, won all 4. It's not like the majority of the seasons that he played, he was in. I mean, it's a 5-day, it's 7 days out of the week, you're working 5 days, Monday to Friday.
Mm-hmm.
You work Monday to Friday. That's basically what it was for Mahomes. Monday to Friday, and the NFL season, this past 7 seasons, it was a week. And Monday to Friday, Mahomes was in the Super Bowl. That's really how it was. And you know what? Nobody can take that away from him. And you know what? When you play in the Super Bowl that much, you're bound to have some bad games.
Yeah. No.
The reason Joe Montana is known as the best Super Bowl quarterback ever is because he didn't play in it that much.
Mm-hmm.
If he played in the Super Bowl every year of his career, I guarantee you he would have had some clunkers. He would have. But because if you do something more consistently, you're going to be bad at it more often. And I think it's a similar thing with Mahomes and with Brady, because Brady has also played in some played bad in some Super Bowls. Some of them the ones that he won.
Mhm.
So I think it's a similar thing with Mahomes. So to say like the GOAT debate is over, like it's only like the GOAT debate is a work in progress and never ends. Like
Mhm.
after we die, there will continue to be a GOAT debate. Like it will just continue to happen. And it's
Yeah.
just like Mahomes is 29.
Mhm.
He's only 29 or maybe 30. I think he's 29.
Mhm.
And it's still very early in his career, and he already has 3 Super Bowls. He already has a Hall of Fame career, and there's a good chance he's going to win a whole bunch more before he
Yeah.
retires. I don't know how good his longevity is going to be, but I mean, the point is he's going to be in a whole bunch more. If he continues on this trajectory for the next 7 years, I'm saying it definitely will happen, but yeah, I mean, his legacy will be very, very similar to Brady's.
Yeah.
Another thing you have to consider is that like a lot of like opinions about sports become obsolete because they just become uh, they just end up being proven wrong. It's like if you look at like Andy Reid, for instance,
Yeah.
I think a lot of people would argue now that Andy Reid is a better head coach than Bill Belichick historically. And he was often criticized as the Eagles head coach, and he can't win the big game or he can't win a
Mhm.
Super Bowl or anything like that.
Yeah.
And then once he gets a good enough quarterback, he is like now widely regarded as like possibly the greatest head coach ever.
Yeah.
I remember Nick Wright brought up a really good point one time, and he
Wow.
was
And
talking about
proving something right for once.
well, he has some really good points and some really bad points.
Yeah.
This
No.
was a really good point that he brought up. He
Yeah.
said, who's widely regarded as the greatest ever in football and basketball? The greatest quarterback ever, Tom Brady. Greatest head coach ever, Bill Belichick. And he'd say the greatest player, Michael Jordan. And the greatest coach, Phil Jackson. So did it
Mm.
just happen to be that the greatest quarterback in NFL history and the greatest head coach in NFL history and the greatest basketball player ever and the greatest head coach ever just happened to just be in both sports, just happened to join forces? Like,
Yeah.
and he makes a good point. It's like, what are the odds of that happening? I would say 1 in maybe 2 million. Like, obviously, one helps the other quite a lot. And it's similar with Mahomes and Brady.
Yeah.
Mahomes, like part of the reason Mahomes and Brady have been so successful throughout their careers is because they're so great, but it's also because they were in great situations. That's
Yeah.
also a part of it too, which you have to take into account. And
I
it's
agree.
not all completely equal.
Mhm. I agree with that, and I think you're talking about specifically for Mahomes, like 29, 30. And yeah, like he could get another like 2 or definitely 3 more for sure. However, I will say this specifically when it came to the dynasty for us for the 20 years specifically is yes, obviously the quarterback accolades and obviously for him specifically make it happen was one thing, but another thing too specifically is what's going to be around him specifically for the long term. Because yes, obviously I could see Mahomes being able to win a lot of Super Bowls specifically with not a lot of things. Mahomes is just that good, but Brady had to take continuously amount of pay cuts to keep a lot of his
Yep.
talent around him to keep the success going. Because I think when you look at specifically the overall of success, you obviously have to have the quarterback to give the success, but you also have to have the stuff around it. It's like specifically making a great dish of something for food, right? And there's specifically like the seasoning that's not there left, and you've got to like
Yeah.
just kind of put it in to kind of give it that next little feel about it. That's really specific when you look at it for a football team. Is yes, you obviously kind of have the leader and somebody specifically that's going to be the driving type of seat, but you need to have the other type of passengers to help you specifically, kind of ride you to the next step. And hopefully Mahomes will have that. I really do.
Yeah.
But I do think specifically that's where he specifically needs to go if he wants to be kind of on the same trajectory potentially what Brady could do.
But like the thing is, he is on the same trajectory. He
No,
is.
like I said, I agree
Yeah.
with it. I'm just talking
I'm not saying it's
specifically.
going to happen, but he really is
Yeah,
objectively on the
yeah.
same track.
I'm just saying specifically in terms of what specifically for him, if he wants to keep this trend kind of going, is the other stuff specifically that has to take into place.
Yeah, yeah. Like I said, if for the next 7 seasons it goes the exact same way, he's at 6 Super Bowls already. Um, like obviously, I don't think anybody's arguing that right now he's the GOAT
Mhm.
because you have to play a full career in order to
Yeah,
fairly compare them.
yeah, it's
Obviously,
hard to
although
do it
I
now.
will tell you, of all the quarterbacks I've ever watched play, I think Mahomes is the best I've ever seen play.
Mm.
He is, I think, the best I've ever seen play. Brady is up there too. Aaron Rodgers is certainly up there. I mean, not with the Jets, but he's up there. And I guess we can get into that. So and also I also want to say it's just like as much as people often hate the Eagles and hate Eagles fans, and a lot of people don't like Sirianni. I will say I think Jalen Hurts, and I said this before. I think Jalen Hurts and Saquon Barkley are two of the most likable players in the NFL. I mean, Jalen Hurts is the best story in the NFL. I mean, just don't forget, not 7 years ago, he was the quarterback at Alabama.
Yep.
And he was benched at halftime when Alabama was losing to Georgia, and they put Tua in, and Alabama won the national championship. Basically lost his starting job on national television, never complained, just worked harder. And then don't forget the next year, he ended up Tua got hurt, and he ended up winning the game for Alabama in the SEC championship game. And then he transferred to Oklahoma. He was a Heisman finalist, and even then, it was a nice story. It was a nice story, but nobody ever thought he would be like much of anything in the NFL. But he ended up getting drafted by the Eagles. Ends up making 2 Super Bowls and winning one of them. And it's just like he's like the ultimate underdog.
Right.
Jalen Hurts is the ultimate underdog. I saw something on Twitter where it's like the Jalen Hurts story is going to beat the Michael Jordan got cut from his high school basketball team story, which, by the way, none of us really even know if that's actually true.
Yeah.
I do have my doubts about that. But, but yes, this one is really true because we all saw it. So I really like that story. Another thing is I know Giant fans are not happy to see Saquon Barkley win a Super Bowl with the Eagles. I will say, though, it's an objectively good thing that Saquon Barkley's on the Eagles. Like, I really just think it's an objectively good thing.
Well,
unless you're a Giant fan, obviously.
Yeah, no, and really quick too, like I understand specifically what Giant fans feel about it, but you got to remember too that Saquon Barkley went to Penn State. Like he specifically went to college in Pennsylvania, so it's really cool. Like there's a ton of people specifically that play specifically out of college in the same state as the same exact type of NFL team. It's just there's always kind of that feel. I mean, there's obviously a lot of people that are thinking Micah Parsons on the Dallas Cowboys. There's been a lot of talks of potentially him possibly join the Philadelphia Eagles because, of course, you have that connection there. So, it's not like it's not common. It's actually fairly common. And, sometimes you just need to change the scenery. It's a business at the end of the day. And, no offense to Giant fans, but they don't have a great offensive line situation compared to what Philly has, clear. They just have a flat-out better team that's ready to win. And Saquon has never won it ever, specifically in his career, and he's been clamoring about it. He talked about it all week this week. And now specifically, especially on his birthday, he gets to go out and celebrate specifically on a birthday with a fan base and a team specifically that brought him in and welcomed him to become their next franchise player and to be literally their best player on this year's team.
Yeah. I also want to talk about the halftime show a little bit. I think Michael Kay said that Drake should sue Kendrick Lamar. Which I don't know. There seems to be a lot of like hot takes about the halftime show. I will have to say, I thought it was okay. It was, I don't know. I didn't think it was great. I didn't think it was terrible. I thought it was kind of in the middle. I will have to defend Kendrick Lamar for a second, which is that like nobody sounds good live. Nobody sounds good live.
Thinking all the time.
Like the reason people go to concerts is for like the atmosphere.
Yeah.
But no singer sounds better. No singer or rapper ever sounds better live than they do like recorded. Obviously, nobody sounds good live. So of course, it wasn't that good. Obviously, I just kind of thought it was okay. But Drake apparently was very unhappy about. I mean, Drake is getting all litigious with this. with this feud. I just thought it was kind of funny to see him get like destroyed like that in front of the whole country on national TV at the Super Bowl and like the biggest possible stage. I thought that was kind of amazing to me. I mean, when it comes to suing, I mean, it's a bit of a stretch to sue somebody for defamation for something like this.
Yeah.
It is very hard to do that.
Mhm.
In general, especially if you're a public figure and it's in a form and it's in music, because it's just like it's like, and I'm not saying it necessarily should be like this, but it really just is really hard to do to win something like this. Uh,
Mhm.
it really has to be like, and there have been talks about Drake like this for like a really long time. I'm not
Yeah.
saying these accusations. I'm not even saying most of the accusations that Kendrick Lamar has made against him are true. Most of them
Mhm.
probably are not, or at the very least, very exaggerated. But I don't think you're going to win that very much. Like I just think it seems like
Yeah.
it seems like a stretch to me.
Mhm. No, I understand. And you were talking about specifically how the halftime shows aren't always like the best.
It's
And
not that
obviously
they're
the Super Bowl's a
bad. It's
halftime.
just that like they're never going to sound good live.
Yeah, but sometimes people, when it comes to specifically the Super Bowl, the game has to sometimes just be really, really good. So people are kind of ready for that second half. They're like, "Oh yes, we got the halftime show ready to go." It's like the game is already a blowout, and then it's just like, well, you can watch the halftime show. It's like, all right, we'll watch it, and the second half is whatever happens in that second half. Um, I know that there was one halftime show, and I don't know specifically if it was good luck or not, but Lady Gaga, a 20-3 comeback for the Patriots. Lady Gaga was the halftime show for that Super Bowl, and just kind of watching, I thought, I'm not the biggest Lady Gaga person. I mean, I think she's good, but I'm just like, something tells me that maybe that there's something cooking for the second half. I don't know what it can be. um, obviously, I'm not a conspiracy theorist when it comes to specifically translating over halftime shows to a second half of for teams at all, per se. But I don't know, something that's kind of is just like, all right, maybe there's something there. But yeah, Drake and Kendrick, obviously. I mean, Kendrick, I thought was fine. I mean, I saw a ton of people on social media saying this sucked, this was ass. And like you said, they're not always going to be great live. Whatever happens,
I
happens.
feel like they would have said that anyway, though.
I don't know because I know last year people were kind of more on the mixed side, at least on social media specifically. I don't know who was it last year specifically again, but some people like,
I don't remember.
yeah, I don't know. I'll look it
You
up
know
right
why
now.
we don't remember? Because the game was good, so we don't have the halftime show to rely on.
Yep, yeah, now it's literally the opposite, right? So, um, but yeah, you can't. I mean, suing specifically, like you have to really like it's. It would have to be like something out of the blue, just absolutely insanity type of behavior or whatever. Um, but yeah, no,
Well,
that's
yeah.
not happening.
Well, the thing is, though, it's like a lot of people were saying, "Oh, how many NFL?" People are making it sound like it was some type of obscure performer or
Mhm.
something like that. That the NFL had like somebody nobody's ever heard of or that most fans haven't heard of. That is ridiculous. Kendrick Lamar is like the most relevant person in music, right? I
Yeah.
mean, certainly right now. By the time when they picked him, it was kind of before all this, but he
Mhm.
was still one of the most relevant. In fact, he was a part of the halftime show 3 years ago. So I don't know
Right.
what the hell they're talking about. Or, like that just speaks to who you know. If you think that nobody knows who he is, like I don't
Yeah.
know what to tell you. Like by
Yeah.
any objective measure, it would almost be like saying like nobody eats McDonald's.
Oh God.
Like I don't really eat McDonald's, but
Me
to say
neither.
oh nobody eats McDonald's, that's an
Right.
objectively stupid statement because
Yeah.
McDonald's is on fire as a business. That's
Yeah.
what Kendrick Lamar is. He's the McDonald's of halftime performers.
No, right. No, I agree with you.
I guess that's a funny way of putting it.
Yeah.
Josh Allen wins MVP.
Hmm.
I'm fine with this. I
Me
mean,
too.
look, I don't generally, it's caused a bunch of controversy. I generally don't care about who wins MVP. People are arguing it's like a lifetime achievement award. And in a sense, it kind of is, but that's all MVPs really are anyway. It's never literally the most valuable player. Jokic would have won 3 years in a row. The NBA didn't
Mhm.
want to do it. LeBron would have won 10 years in a row if he had won MVP. Kobe has won MVP, and that was a lifetime achievement award. It's because he hasn't won it yet. It's the same. I guess it's sort of similar now in a sense. I mean, I don't know. You can make an argument for him or Lamar Jackson. I mean,
Yeah.
I would argue actually Josh Allen is more valuable to his team than Lamar Jackson in a
Right.
sense because I think a lot of uh, a huge part of the Ravens offense is Derrick Henry. And I know
Mhm.
people will take that as a knock on Lamar Jackson, but it's not. It's just obviously a fact that Derrick Henry took a lot of pressure off of him. And Josh Allen, I would say specifically, is more valuable to the Bills offense than Lamar Jackson is.
I agree.
But I mean, either one winning, I'm fine with, I would
Yeah.
say. But I'm okay with it in general because yeah, that's what MVPs are. They're
Mhm.
they're like it's about the story. It's about the lifetime achievement. Um, it was time for him to win,
Mhm.
basically, is kind of what it was, which is what MVPs are. It was time for Kobe to win MVP in
Mhm.
2004, I think it
Yeah.
was. Was he really the MVP that year? I don't
Mhm.
know. Arguably, but
Mhm.
it's because he didn't win before. He never won before, and that's why he won MVP. We all know that's what happens every year with MVPs. I mean,
Yeah.
it's the same thing with like comeback player of the year.
Mhm.
Joe Flacco won comeback player of the year. I mean, DeMar Hamlin literally died on the field and came back. So,
Mhm.
and ended up playing again. I mean, like, I don't know, was Joe Flacco the biggest comeback that year?
Mhm.
No. But, he had a whole career, it won a Super Bowl, and, it was the same thing there. It's the same thing here. I
Mhm.
generally don't care about MVPs, mainly because players on my teams don't win them. Um, but yeah,
Um,
it's the same thing. I don't know. I'm fine with it.
yeah, no, I'm fine with it too. I mean, of course, unless you're maybe a fan of the team specifically, that like Bill fan, Ravens fans going at it. Oh, this so and so, like it's what it is. I mean, they're both great quarterbacks, and it's. I think that it's really cool if you just appreciate specifically that who wins it more specifically than arguing about it because you might have your turn next. I mean, a lot of times specifically they don't give the MVP every exact same type of guy. So maybe next year Lamar Jackson gets it. But when you talk about MVP, Nick, I mean, I obviously, Super Bowl MVPs, that's obviously one thing because obviously it's like you win not only the big thing, but you obviously win and award the second thing. Win the MVP specifically in the regular season, great. But it's like if you're like just remembered specifically for that, like a lot of people with MVPs specifically are not winning. Um,
Yeah.
so it's just kind of the way you kind of look at it. But like I have no knock specifically on this at all. I mean, Josh Allen specifically, I think he deserves it, and I think that's the next thing that he has next going for him. I think is to win the Super Bowl. I think he has been right there, like outside of Mahomes, obviously getting there. I mean, Josh Allen. If Patrick Mahomes is not going for him every single year, Josh Allen specifically is being in Super Bowls. Let's be real here.
Yeah.
Or Joe Burrow. Joe Burrow in the AFC title game a couple times. Joe
Like,
Burrow's already been to the
yeah.
Super Bowl once. But if you look at it, Lamar Jackson, Joe Burrow, Josh Allen, Josh Allen has been the closest out of all the three of them to get to the Super Bowl specifically. Oh, I guess Joe Burrow has because obviously he's been that Super Bowl. But just in terms of the appearances specifically, it's really been Josh Allen, and you know he deserves it. He'll get his chance. Joe Burrow will get his chance, and Lamar Jackson I think will get their chance. So like that's why specifically I have nothing against this at all.
Yeah. Also, Eli Manning not in the Hall of Fame yet. He just wasn't first ballot. I think Hall of Fame voters, especially in baseball, often have a stick up their ass in a lot of ways.
Yeah.
I don't understand why players are either first ballot or not, or second ballot, third. Like I don't understand Hall of Fame voters who won't vote a player in the first time, but will the second time. That doesn't make any sense. You're either a Hall of Famer or you're not. Eli
Yeah.
Manning is done playing. His legacy hasn't changed. It
Mhm.
doesn't change from year to year. His career is over. So
Right.
I don't know why he's a Hall of Fame. He's not a Hall of Famer this year, but he is next year. Baseball writers are like this a lot. Baseball voters, like that one asshole who didn't vote in Ichiro,
Oh,
uh, who
I happen
wouldn't.
to know who it was by the way.
Yeah, we don't know who it was, but that guy is just like
I do know
probably
who it is.
diabolical.
I
Whoever that
looked it
guy
up.
is probably diabolical. He's just behind his computer screen, like they're all talking about me. like,
I
like,
think I
that
think
is pretty unbelievable.
I think he purposely knew for a fact that I could literally be the biggest asshole, but I'm gonna do it anyway, so people can just get a reaction out of me.
Yeah, and I guess it's kind of funny, and
Yeah,
it's very funny actually, in a
yeah.
sense. I just don't get that. Or I don't understand why Hall of Fame voters do that. They're like, I won't vote him in this time, but I will next year. That makes no sense. That makes no sense at all. He's either a Hall of Famer or he's not. His stats haven't changed. His Super Bowls haven't changed. It's not like next year they might find out that he only has one Super Bowl and they're gonna, like the NCAA, they're gonna like take it away or something like that. like that, like something like that's that's obviously not gonna happen. So I don't understand why that happens with Hall of Fame voters. It is such an odd thing to me.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, like you were mentioning, right? Eli Manning. Listen, I like Eli Manning a lot. Obviously, he saw me twice in Super Bowls, right?
No.
But let's be real. Without those two Super Bowls, what has he really done? I mean, he's obviously one of the best Giants. Obviously, go out there, right? But if you look at career-wise specifically, right? I have a buddy of mine, by the way, who's a Giants fan, and he's talked about this. I think that Eli Manning will probably get in the Hall of Fame coming up soon. I think he will. In terms of first ballot, probably not, but definitely he will get in the Hall of Fame.
Well, not. We know for a fact not. He's not going to be first ballot.
No. That. But just in terms of just getting the Hall of Fame, I think that he'll get there at some point. But if you're just looking at it just in terms of the whole picture, right? In terms of his stats, I think most of his career outside of the Super Bowl is for Eli Manning, and he was on some really bad Giants teams, to be fair. But most of his career is all 500. I mean, if you look at the overall chunk of it. So, like, when people from Canada are like, okay, you have your 500 type career specific for your resume. Is that good enough specifically to get you into the Hall of Fame? No, it's just not. And that's obviously not a knock on you. I think, like I said, Eli's a great quarterback. He literally took away Brady from potentially having like 9 to 10 Super Bowls.
Yeah.
So he's a hero for many people. But yeah, no, like it says here, right? First ballot, it's just like, most of the time it's anonymous, specifically, obviously, for terms of the voters and stuff. I got obviously a bone to pick with them, but that's for another story. But in terms of just for him not being in as of right now, I just think that there's a lot more people specifically that deserve it right now. And two, I think just when you look at his overall big picture, right? The stats are obviously good enough, but I think that there's a lot more people right now that are deserving, and that's obviously the fact.
Yeah. I just think it's dumb. Like either he's a Hall of Famer or he's not.
Yeah.
These dumb games that they have to play, a lot of these baseball writers have to play. So I also want to talk about the news. Speaking of Hall of Fame quarterbacks, Aaron Rodgers.
Jets. Oh man.
Aaron Rodgers not going back to the Jets. This was one of the worst experiences I've ever had as a fan, honestly. Here's how you know an era has failed. If the best part of the era was the acquisition. What was the best part of the Durant, Harden, Kyrie Irving era? The acquisition. That was the best part. The acquisition of those players.
The hype.
I know it was a different time. The acquisition was the best.
Mm-hmm.
It's the same thing here. The acquisition of Aaron Rodgers was the part that felt the best. That's how you know it was a failed experiment. I mean, I guess I'm fine with it. I would have been fine with it if they had kept him too, because they might as well have just kept him another year because he might have been the best option at quarterback anyway.
Yeah.
Like they might as well. They still have to pay him a lot of the money. So I don't know. I would have been fine with it either way. I guess. I mean,
yeah.
Like the Jets are just a disaster area of an organization.
Yeah, I mean, I can go a long time with this, but obviously we're kind of low on time. But all pretty much I will say specifically is that he might be retiring at some point in time. I wouldn't be shocked specifically for the Jets if guys like Garrett Wilson, guys like Devontae Adams move along with Aaron Rodgers. But I also, in the back of my mind specifically, he's played this game for a long, long time. And yeah, when you talk about the overall acquisition, I mean, specifically the hype around this overall thing in terms of, having the next Jets' biggest thing and just unfortunately just kind of blow up in your face, Nick, in terms of what happened. And it just sucks because I don't obviously want to say it's a Jets thing to do, but it kind of is when you essentially kind of have the great things about it. And I feel like, listen, I feel bad. Like if that obviously happened to my team in terms of like the hype and stuff of a big time player, and it's 4 plays in specifically of that first season, and then the second season, it just coaching stuff left and right. It just kind of turned to shit, and that was that. It's just like, man, it's just like there's probably a lot of fans that are just like, where did the time go? And that was that. So that sucked,
Yeah.
but you got to
By the
absolutely
way,
move on.
Antonio Brown just tweeted Steelers drafted Chase Claypool instead of Jalen Hurts. Think about that. I mean, yeah, it looks kind of bad, although I'm not so convinced Jalen Hurts would have been able to win with the Steelers.
Yeah.
Maybe he would have. I don't know.
Mhm.
It's not a guarantee that if you put a player on one team and then place them in some other city that they're definitely going to win, obviously. Um, but yeah, I mean, look, Aaron Rodgers, I think he's going to keep playing, or actually it kind of depends on what happens after his next ayahuasca trip. But there's a good chance he might continue playing.
No,
And
he
I bet
could.
wherever he's going to go next, he's going to excel.
Yeah, no.
Because the Jets got rid of him. So he's going to
Mhm.
be great wherever he goes next. Just like Brett Favre when he went to the Vikings
Yep.
after he played on the Jets. So a little bit more news. Quickly, Jimmy Butler traded to the Warriors because he was unhappy in Miami. And Miami ended up getting they ended up getting Andrew. It was like a 5-team, complicated 5-team trade.
Crazy.
Uh,
Yeah.
and now Andrew Wiggins is on Miami. Hold on, let me pull it up.
Yeah, there's a couple moving pieces specifically after the fact too.
Yeah, because I don't remember every single detail. But it was a 5-team trade.
Yeah.
Yeah. The Warriors got Jimmy Butler, 2 second-round picks, and cash considerations.
Mhm.
Miami got Andrew Wiggins, Kyle Anderson, Davion Mitchell from the Raptors, and a 2025 first-round pick, protected pick. The Jazz got KJ Martin, Josh Richardson, a 2028 second-round pick, a 2031 second-round pick, cash considerations. The Pistons got Dennis Schroeder, Lindy Waters, in the 2031 second-round pick, and the Raptors got PJ Tucker, a 2026 second-round pick, and cash considerations. So this is just really complicated. Yeah, Jimmy Butler was just unhappy in Miami the whole time. He was just unhappy and wanted out. It's a new era where the inmates run the asylum, basically.
Yeah, no, it was a change of scenery that had to be needed. I mean, Jimmy obviously was clamoring for a trade ever since Christmas. And he finally got his wish. And I think Golden State was specifically the right spot for him. Um, and now specifically, he had his debut the other night against the Bulls. It looked like he was good. So I think sometimes when you're at a specific place for a long period of time, a great era is good. But, a lot of the times they're not. When the player's frustrated, they want to be out. They got to get out. And that's what happened.
Yeah. I also want to talk a little bit about Pete Alonso re-signing with the Mets. And I really like this move from the Mets. He ended up screwing himself. He ended up turning down more money he ended up turning down like $70 million over 3 years. As opposed, well, I guess it would have been less money per year. But the Mets signed him for $54 million for 2 years with a player option, which I think is a fairly good move. I mean, look, I prefer the Mets to sign Alonso, to keep Alonso, than to not keep him.
Yeah.
For sure. But if we couldn't keep him and another team offered way more, I'd be like, all right, fine. It's a cost of doing business. It's a trade-off I'm willing to make. I'm okay with that. I would be the first to tell you Alonso had a fairly bad pedestrian season last year. He did not have a very good year. Certainly not by Alonso standards. But this is a good move for the Mets because just there's no real downside to it. Like what's going to happen? Even if at most you have him for 2 years, and if he's not great, then you just all right, you don't resign. He's not gonna. It's not like you're having him until he's 40 years old. And he still is fairly young. He's like 30 now, so he still is fairly young. And it's just, I think it's a fairly low risk move. I mean, Steve Cohen has money coming out of his butt. Basically, there's no salary cap in baseball, so I'm fine with it. Really, I think it's a pretty good move. I would agree it's too much money if they had to pay him a whole bunch of guaranteed money for 10 years or something like that, but that's not what happened. I've never seen a player Alonso had such little trade value. He had such
Yeah.
little trade value, it seemed like. Boris was not able to Boris was not able to work his magic, it seemed like.
Yeah, no, I think this, and you were talking about specifically that Pete didn't have a great year, and he did. He didn't have a great year for his standard, especially in a walk year. But I will say he made it up for him in the postseason. I mean, specifically without some of the big postseason heroics that Pete had. Say if Pete specifically just had a bad year in general in terms of regular season and postseason, I guarantee specifically he's not even going to be getting high AAV. He specifically got 27 mil for 2 years, 54 mil. That's probably not going to be even anything if you didn't have a good postseason. So he made specifically up that money for at least the postseason production that he had. And I think specifically, and Evan Roberts from FAN, you probably obviously know Evan Roberts,
Of
and he's
course.
obviously a big Met, and of course you do. But all I'm saying specifically, he's a big Met fan. And he does specifically a podcast that I do like to
The
watch.
Rico Bronya podcast.
Yeah. I'll tell him to watch it in there. And when he reacted specifically to the Pete signing, he basically said, you could say pretty much whatever you want to say. Pete Alonso coming into the season with the lineup is good. You put Pete Alonso in that lineup, it's a much better type of lineup. Whatever you want to say specifically, you could obviously make the overall case for it because, Juan Soto, Mark Vientos, Francisco Lindor. Now you specifically have a top four, Nick, of Francisco Lindor, Mark Vientos, Juan Soto, and Pete Alonso. That's a very, very good, top four. And also, too, I think Pete Alonso now, given specifically with his overall money now, I think sometimes when you're in a walk year, you obviously pressure a lot. Now he obviously has his money, 2 years, 54 mil. And specifically, if he does well in the first year, it's a really good deal as well because he could opt out after the first year, try to get more money on the market. And if he doesn't get any specific suitors, he can go back and just play it out until the rest of it. So, like you said, it's a great overall contract for the Mets. And the Mets, I think, are just a much better team with him.
Yeah. And by the way, speaking of Evan Roberts, I remember when I was 17, I did Fantasy Phenom with WFAN, which I don't think they do it anymore.
Mm-hmm.
I don't think they do. But I
Yeah.
remember it was at the Palisades Mall, and I did it, and I did Fantasy Phenom, and Evan Roberts judged me. He was one of the judges. It was maybe one of the worst monologues to ever exist, but and it was like I think it was like a 3-minute monologue, but it involved like NFL draft news and RG3, something to do with RG3. I don't remember every single word of it, but I do remember that specifically. So I don't know. I don't think Evan Roberts remembers, but
Yeah.
I
cool.
remember pretty vividly. All right. So that's our show. We'll be back next week. This is Moving the Goalposts, everybody. See you then.
See ya.